Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, let me have my panel out here. We're going to, first of all, we've got Dr. Sebastian Gorka. All of you know who he is. Philip Haney and Dr. Zudhi Jasser. All right. I'm going to make a quick introduction and we're going to jump right into the panel here because I want to use our time to let these people talk. You know Dr. Sebastian Gorka. He is a former British military intelligence officer. He is now the founder and president of Threat Knowledge Group. He is formerly was a member of the Marine Corps University. And today, he will be signing out in the foyer in the book area his book, Defeating Jihad, which is a New York Times bestseller. Welcome, Dr. Gorka.
Thank you, sir.
Phil Haney was one of the founding members of the Department of Homeland Security. He is previously of the Customs and Border Patrol. He was identified as a whistleblower on what he has seen happening within our government with regard to the protection of this nation. And he is right now also a New York Times best-selling author of a book called See Something, Say Nothing. Welcome, Phil Haney. And our final speaker is a very courageous man, and I think that all of you have seen him in the media, a man that has stood very boldly, Dr. Zudhi Jasser, a medical doctor, an 11-year veteran of, thank you, 11-year veteran of the U.S. Navy. He is the founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, in which he is trying to create reform within Islam. And his book, A Battle for the Soul of Islam, it will also be for sale, and he will be signing those books. So all three of these authors will sign books. I think about 12 o'clock, I think, is when we're going to do it. You'll see it on your schedule. So welcome them again, and let's get started. Thank you. All right, first I'd like to go to Dr. Gorka and ask for his opening comments.
Thank you, General. It's a distinct honor to be here for my first ever appearance at your event. Let me start by saying that we need to remember that this Sunday marks the 15th anniversary of the longest war the Republic has been engaged in since 1776. And the question I'd like you to ask yourselves is very simply the following. Do you feel today, yourself, your families, your friends, do you feel safer today than you did on September the 10th, 2001? And why is that? You know in your gut, you sense that we are more in danger, more in peril today than we have ever been. But let's look at the facts behind your common sense intuition. And let me just give you some of the data points that will allow you to understand what it is that really makes us more in danger today. Number one, ISIS is the most powerful modern jihadi organization the world has ever seen. Let me give you the facts from inside President Obama's own administration. 2 weeks ago, he went to the Pentagon for a special meeting on ISIS. At that meeting, the National Counterterrorism Center, which is part of the Director of National Intelligence's complex, gave him a briefing on ISIS. That map, which was reported in the mainstream media, said that ISIS now has fully operational affiliates in 18 nations around the world. 2 years ago, that number was 7. In 24 months, they've more than doubled their global expanse. Not only that, it controls territory in different regions of the world. We focus on Iraq, we focus on Syria. But ISIS has control of territory in Nigeria, Boko Haram territory. There are Taliban leaders in Afghanistan that have sworn allegiance to ISIS. But that sounds very far away. The Middle East, Central Asia. Let's bring it all back home. My wife and I, Catherine Gorka, published a report 1 week before San Bernardino on what ISIS is doing in America. You'll hear much more from Phil and others, but let me just give you again the key data points. Since ISIS declared the caliphate on June 29th, 2014, so just over 2 years ago, here in America, we have killed or arrested 110 terrorists linked to ISIS. Not 10, not 50, 110. One of the most recent being the arrest 2 weeks ago in Roanoke, Virginia, of an ISIS terrorist. If you look at those arrests and break them down into what they were doing, it gets even more disturbing. Half of the people we have intercepted are what the Federal Bureau of Investigation calls travelers. They are US subjects who want to leave America to become jihadis in Iraq or Syria. 20% of them are middle management. They're recruiters, talent spotters, people buying the tickets for the jihadis to fly to the Middle East. But that leaves more than a third, 38% of everybody we have intercepted, has sworn allegiance to the new caliph, the new emperor of Islam, and decided that the best way to serve ISIS is to kill infidels here in America. They don't need to go anywhere. They can go and buy a rifle, 2,000 rounds of ammunition, go to the range, practice, and then go to a nightclub in Orlando and slaughter 49 Americans. So what has our response been? After Orlando, almost instantly, the American government and the left-wing media said, well, clearly Omar Mateen is a man with repressed homosexual tendencies who wanted to take revenge on a Latin lover. No, he's a jihadi who wants to kill people who he sees as infidels. But that reality was censored by a cabinet member of this administration. The Attorney General removed and changed the wording of the 911 call, the transcript that Omar Mateen made. Because what did he say in that conversation with that dispatcher? He wasn't asking for them to send ambulances to the Pulse nightclub. He was saying, I am a jihadi. I am fighting a holy war for Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the caliph of ISIS. That had to be removed, that had to be deleted. And when he said Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest, the Department of Justice decided they'll change the word Allah on the transcript to God. That's political interference in the intelligence cycle. That's a distortion of a reality, and that is what endangers you and every American. We are losing this war against our enemy, and we have to understand that our enemy is a new type of totalitarianism. Just like the communists before them, and just like the fascists and the Nazis, groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS are totalitarians. Either you join them, or they will enslave or kill you. It is that simple. These are not individuals you can negotiate with. And the sad thing is, America is the most powerful nation the world has ever seen. It is also the greatest nation the world has ever seen. And there's no excuse for losing this war. None. So what will it take to win this war? In my book, Defeating Jihad, I lay out a very simple three-stage plan that the next president could follow if he wished to, and in my opinion, it would bring victory. Number one, no more politics in the threat assessment. No more politics. There is no room for political correctness inside our intelligence community. If the enemy says, I am a jihadi, you don't get to call them, oh, poor unemployed young men. If the enemy says, I'm a jihadi, you get to call them that. We didn't delete the word Nazi when we were fighting the Third Reich. We didn't say about the Soviet Union that they're not communists, they're just misguided Democrats. Truth about the enemy, and truth about the fact that they are evil. They're not misguided, they are evil. Second part of my plan, we have to understand that, I'm sorry, whether you like it or not, this is not a war with Islam. Remember, what was the religion of the fighter pilot in the cage who was burnt alive? He wasn't a Christian, he wasn't a Jew. He was a Jordanian fighter pilot, a Sunni Muslim. This is a religious war inside Islam. And in fact, the greatest number of victims are Muslims. They've decimated the Christians in Iraq. They've chased the Yazidis out of their territorial homes. But the majority of victims are Muslims who disagree with ISIS. We have to help the Muslims who want to be on our side to defeat ISIS. The Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Emiratis, and we can add the Kurds into that mix as well. We don't want white-skinned or brown-skinned Americans to be the face of this war. It should be the king of Jordan. It should be the president of Egypt. But that is never going to happen unless they trust us and believe we have their six. And in the last 7.5 years, they don't quite believe that. I wonder why. Last point. The long-term victory is not measured in body bags or predator strikes. It's measured in delegitimizing the ideology of jihad. Just like President Reagan delegitimized communism, we have to help our Muslim allies delegitimize jihadism. Those three things together, and we can win. And remember, my last message, it is no accident that in the last 100 years, two totalitarianisms threatened Western civilization, communism and fascism. And in both cases, which country was instrumental in their defeat? Us, America. It wasn't the French, it wasn't the Belgians, it wasn't the Brits, it was America. And once again, a Western civilization is in an existential threat environment because of the new totalitarians. And once again, it's going to take America to defeat them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gorka. And now I'd like to go to Phil Haney.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to ask a rhetorical question, and that is, where did all of this start? Did it actually start on 9/11? No, it actually did not start on 9/11. Oftentimes when I've been speaking lately, people will ask me the question, why are they doing this? And I struggled with a prompt response to that question until I began reading the Declaration of Independence, where it says that to secure these rights, Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that when any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people, and here's the clue, to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such forms as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. That was written in a benign context, but our adversaries on the progressive left and the global Islamic movement seek to alter or abolish our form of government, and that is why they're natural allies. And what do I mean by that? Who is seeking to alter or abolish our U.S. Constitution? Well, the strategy of the global Islamic movement is to implement Sharia law. It is actually quite simple. What is kaleidoscopic and complicated, if you will, are the tactics that are used to do it. Every single Salafi, pro-Sharia, pro-Jihad Muslim group in the world has the same exact strategy, which is the implementation of Sharia law. If you listen to them carefully, they will tell you that. That includes the Muslim Brotherhood. That is a global organization which is well established here in the United States for the last 40 to 50 years. The motto of the Muslim Brotherhood is Wa'idu, which means prepare. Prepare for what? Well, the word is derived from Quran 8:60, al-Anfal, the spoils of war, in my opinion, the most violent chapter in the entire Quran. Prepare to do what? Prepare to terrify your enemies and to defeat them in war. So if that is the stated motto, the operative verb of the Muslim Brotherhood organization, including the front groups that operate here in the United States, such as the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Islamic Society of North America, the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America, and the North American Islamic Trust, three of least of which of these were named as co-conspirators in the Holy Land Foundation trial in November of 2008. Then my simple question to the Obama administration is, why would you form an overt political alliance with a group that has stated plainly that they intend to overthrow our form of government and alter or abolish it? Why would you do that? Jay Johnson, the Secretary of Homeland Security, who said to Senator Cruz, when he was asked directly about my claims during our testimony on the Hill on the 28th of June 2016, said he didn't know me. He wouldn't recognize me if I walked into the room. And that no, he had not taken time to look into my claims. And that, paraphrasing, it really wasn't that important anyway, because we're talking about labels and interesting political conversation. Well, the people in San Bernardino and Orlando and Fort Hood are not interesting political conversations or labels. They are people that died because of the ideology of the global Islamic movement, which is to implement Sharia and to replace or oppose any form of human legislation, and that includes the U.S. Constitution. One of the concepts within the explanatory memorandum, which is summarized in a phrase called al-Mutsima, al-Islamiyya, al-Qaeda, is that we would have what is called civilizational jihad or settlement jihad. So if we understand these perils that we face, then why is our administration openly aiding and abetting the global Islamic movement by bringing people that no one can identify to come and live in our country? And if it is such a noble cause, then why do they subvert the constitutional principles of our government and co-opt the process in little towns around the country like Rutland, Vermont, and Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and Sioux Falls, South Dakota? Why is it that they have to parachute these people in the middle of the night if it is such a noble process that they're involved with, and that nobody can find out who vets them, what the criteria of the vetting process is, and the last people to face them are the law enforcement officers like myself, retired, who admit them into the country. Sebastian talked about the San Bernardino shooting. I worked on a case at the National Targeting Center that was authorized by the Attorney General of DHS as a good, solid law enforcement case. We had 1,200 law enforcement actions taken on this case of 1,600 individuals or organizations affiliated with the Tablighi Jamaat movement, part of a broader organization called Deobandi, which originates in the Indian subcontinent. Not only did we have 1,200 law enforcement actions, but myself, I was credited with finding 300 individuals affiliated with terrorism related to the case. And we also discovered that 25% of the people at Gitmo were affiliated with Tablighi. But the State Department refused to designate them as a terrorist group because they considered that we were violating their civil rights and civil liberties, and they shut the case down. And they obliterated data, and I mean obliterated data from the system. This is Loretta Lynch on steroids. They completely took the case out of the system. The case included individuals that were affiliated with the San Bernardino Mosque, Dar Ulum al-Islamiyya San Bernardino, and therefore my plausible premise is that the attacks could have been stopped or averted. The same with the Fort Pierce Islamic Center Omar Mateen was part of, and his father is the vice president of. That mosque was also part of the same Tablighi Jamaat Deobandi network that the government shut down. Why did they shut them down? That's what I'm here to ask today. Why did you eliminate the records from the system, which led directly to the deaths of American citizens? Why are you protecting the civil rights and civil liberties of people like Tashfeen Malik, and you said you did not query her social media because you were concerned about her civil rights and civil liberties? Why are you putting the rights of these people above the liberties and safety of American citizens? I'd like you to ask your congressman that. And was it personal? Yes, it was personal. I was investigated 9 times by my own agency. I was stripped of my weapon. Anybody in law enforcement and military knows that that's like being stripped naked professionally. All the access to the systems that I used during the course of my career were taken. My secret clearance was revoked. And then, by the way, 4 days later, we found out that all of the secret information in our background clearance paperwork was hacked out of the Department of Homeland Security. Somewhere between 10 and 15 million people's biometric information, names, Social Security, all of it was hacked out of DHS databases, right at the same time that they were investigating me for putting information into the system, identifying the threat. So that's the nature of it. That's what I describe in the book, See Something, Say Nothing. I did see something. I took a vow. By the way, how many people in the audience have taken a vow to protect their country from threat, both foreign and domestic? Give them a hand. I'm quite sure there's no one here who feels that their vow has retired, not a single person, and nor has mine. I will go where my vow leads me. I am not deterred. I will stand up and fight for our constitutional right for liberty and life and the pursuit of happiness in opposition to the strategy of the global Islamic movement, which is implementation of Sharia law, and the progressive leftists who seek to alter or abolish. It's called hope and change. Alter or abolish our form of government. No, let's stand on the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and you will be on solid ground, immunized essentially from charges of racism, bigotry, and Islamophobia if you simply stand up for the principles that our country was founded on. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And now I'd like to go to Dr. Jasser.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here and humbled that I was invited. I've always watched from afar the Value Voter Summit, and it's just, I wish my parents, my father or my grandfather were alive to see this, and thank you. It's an honor to be with you, General, and Sebastian and Phil. You know, I have to tell you, I opened my book with a line saying that after 9/11, I wanted to re-sign up with the Navy and get those bastards. And
Yeah.
And then I realized that the best way I could serve my country again was to lead or help lead the battle from within the House of Islam. And that was an attack against our country, the largest attack since World War II by Al-Qaeda, which pales in comparison to the battle that we have now with ISIS. And at the time when we formed our organization, our mission statement was to preserve and protect the Constitution through the separation of mosque and state. Our mission was not counterterrorism, which is a tactic. And people wondered, why would you form a group separation mosque and state? That didn't make sense. And then 12 years later, ISIS starts forming, and they say, oh, now we get it. And even ISIS pales in comparison to the reality of what the threat of jihad is. So what I hope I can do over the next few minutes is sort of lay out for you not only what the problem is, but really what the solution is. And as Seb said, the battle is within the House of Islam. So as long as America sits this out and does not take sides within the House of Islam, a quarter of the world's population is going to go through a transformation that either becomes dominated by caliphists, those who believe in the hegemony of the world under Islam and the rest of the world is the land of war, or it'll be dominated by those who believe in liberty, secular democracy. And that's why the Arab awakening, as much as it turned into a vacuum that became a disaster for security, was actually an opportunity, was actually a time in which you finally had people doing what my father and my grandfather had prayed for, which was an attempt to defeat the dictators, the thugs, the Assads, the Saddam Husseins, the Gaddafis, the Khomeinists of the world, in order to actually have a chance at reform. Because the reason I'm doing this work is the only place, the laboratories that you can do this work is in the West. In the Middle East, you cannot do this work, which is the work of reform, the work of challenging the men in robes who dominate and suffocate any attempt at reform or free speech. So as you look for the solution, when you say it's only counterterrorism, you're fighting a tactic. That's a vacuum. Even if you defeat it, it's a whack-a-mole program, because you get rid of ISIS, the next group will come up, Jamaat al-Islamiyya, Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas. They'll keep coming up because the font is the idea, the supremacism of a fascism which is based in theocracy. So forget whether, I don't expect all of you to become experts in Islam, but I think if you look at our Declaration of Independence and our battle in America, it was against theocracy. And the West defeated theocracy, which was quite bloody. Millions died in Europe fighting against theocracy, and Islam is in that time in history. So as you look at the time in history that the world is in, Islam is in that time in history. And yes, maybe in the short term, we can fight groups and find allies with the kings of Jordan and the king of Saudi Arabia and others that we might have common enemies. But do not be fooled. These are not our allies. Your allies are folks on the ground like my family and others that share our values. The dictators, the monarchs of the Middle East are not our allies because they basically have contained Sharia states. They believe in an Islamic state. Now, they claim to be our allies, but yet they are, the best quote I heard is they are like the firefighters and the arsonists at the same time. Yeah. Because they push ideas which basically radicalize their population, and then when they feed the pit bull and it comes back and bites them in the you-know-what, they say, oh, now we're with you against this war, and yet 15 of the 19 hijackers on 9/11 were Saudi. And who funded ISIS? The Saudis and Qataris and the Turks and Erdogan and the Turks and other Sunni Islamists who are really, what is the battle we're fighting? It's against Salafi jihadism. Salafism is the belief that we as Muslims need to return everything to the way it was exactly at the time of the Prophet. Salaf means friends of the Prophet. Jihad has many meanings, but primarily globally now it means a military war by a Muslim army. So the solution to all of this is what I believe and what we've formed is the Muslim Reform Movement. It has a 2-page declaration that turns upside down this entire battle and says it's not only against terrorism, but what we are for. Because at the end of the day, your Muslim allies are American patriots, French patriots, Belgian patriots, Canadian patriots who believe in a social contract in which they would die for your Constitution, they would die for liberty and freedom, and never want to die for Islam or some faith or some theocracy. And that's the way I was raised. That's why my parents felt American the minute they escaped Syria in 1967, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. But make no mistake, the enemy of our enemy is not our friend. Our friends are our allies who agree with the separation of mosque or church and state, who believe in the equality of men and women, who condemn blasphemy laws, who condemn apostasy laws, who believe in secular governance and that everyone has equal access to the government and to free speech, who condemn Islamist organizations, be they violent or nonviolent. The entire Homeland Security apparatus is focused on a tactic, countering violent extremism. That needs to change. The new long war is against Islamism. But we cannot win this militarily. Our sons and daughters will be fighting for the next 2 centuries if you think we're going to beat jihad militarily. But we will win it if we have a strategy of a liberty doctrine where we promote and defend those groups on the ground domestically and abroad that believe in our social contracts. Our 2-page Muslim Reform Movement Declaration has that. It says in 12 points the principles that we believe in, and we condemn all concepts of the caliphate. We don't only condemn ISIS, we believe that it's time to put the concept of the Islamic State into the dustbin of history. So how do you do that? I can be a devout Muslim and believe in my scripture and not want to live in an Islamic state. And Muslims in Egypt demonstrated that. 1 year of the Muslim Brotherhood running government in Egypt did more to destroy the ideas of the Islamist movement of the Brotherhood than 60 years of dictatorship under Nasser, Sadat, or Mubarak. Why? Because the exchange of ideas, the ownership of their government did a lot more for that. Now, things may get worse before they get better, and we're certainly seeing that in Syria. But the best anti-nuclear program in Iran is the Green Revolution. That's what should have been. Our policy should be regime change, not regime appeasement, as we see with this administration. So at the end of the day, as you leave here, engage your Muslim population. Our leadership in this country is petro-Islamic. It's engaged to the monarchs and the oil interests in the Middle East. They are part of the Muslim Brotherhood legacy groups, but the majority of American Muslims do not adhere to the groups that claim to represent us in America. Most of them are not engaged identifying with these groups. Engage your Muslim friends that are in professional organizations, in universities, in ethnic communities, be they Indian, Bangladeshi, Indonesian, Malaysian, Syrian. There are ethnic communities that are not engaged in the identity Islamist movement that are part of the future of our faith community. And I think those are the groups that need to begin to be held to task on where they stand on reform, and do they or do they not sign and believe in our Muslim Reform Movement Declaration. It's a simple declaration. We mailed it to every mosque in America, every Muslim leadership, and for the most part, we're getting crickets. And the reason is they don't want to be held account for the principles that we share as Americans. It's very simple. It should be used for security clearances. It should be used for vetting refugees and vetting immigrants, and that's how it can be done to keep us safe, but not change what America means to families like mine. So thank you. Understand where Islam is in its history. Understand that the key to security is engaging with Muslim reformers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jasser. We've got about 5 minutes, so I'm going to go through a little lightning round here and ask you, our 3 panelists, to give us short answers here. And I'm going to start with Dr. Gorka. I think everybody wonders why the Obama administration will not recognize who our enemy is. What is your assessment of that?
A couple of big reasons. The best answer is a paper that my wife wrote called The Flawed Science Behind U.S. Counterterrorism Strategy, and you can read that online. But in a nutshell, two issues. Number one, the analysis of the intelligence community was driven by an individual at the National Counterterrorism Center who convinced the Obama cabinet that all terrorism is the result of poverty and lack of education, which any 10-year-old knows is completely bogus, because if poverty and lack of education led to terrorism, half of India would be terrorists. But they're not, because the missing ingredient is, of course, always ideology. But we're not allowed to talk about the ideology because that is verboten. You cannot discuss it because it is religious. Second part of it is one I realized about 5 years into this war. One of my students at National Defense University opened my eyes to it. I don't care what religion you follow. You can pray to Buddha, you can be a Zoroastrian, but if you don't have faith yourself, you will never understand our enemy, ever. You will never understand the logic of a suicide bomber. They think they've won when they detonate their vest. And the trouble is, we have a political elite, unfortunately on the left and in times on the right, that does not take faith seriously. If they go to church or temple, it's a cool networking thing with the coffee and donuts afterwards, right? Yeah. If you need leaders who understand the power of faith and that our enemy is religiously motivated. And right now, we don't have that in federal government.
Thank you, Dr. Gorka. Now I'd like to go to Phil Haney. Phil, you've articulated how our federal government is failing to secure our borders. Is there hope that the states can do things, given the fact that when Arizona tried to, they were immediately challenged by the federal government?
The ALAC movement is still strong in America. The American law for American courts. That is what I call addressing the threat that's right in front of you. Be very clear that the U.S. Constitution, Article 6, is the supreme law of the land. There should be no equivocation about that. Sharia law is very plainly defined. It is actually a book you can hold in your hand, which means you can literally use it as a bulldozer to destroy the civil rights and civil liberties argument or the First Amendment argument. It's not about freedom of expression or religion. It is a form of law. So the ALAC movement. Another one is the Muslim Brotherhood Terrorist Designation Bill. It's a mirror bill in the Senate and the House, 3892 on the House side. Call your congressmen and encourage them to support it if they're not. And thank them for supporting it if they do. If we pass the designation bill, you will send a shockwave around the pro-Sharia, pro-Jihad, Salafi, Islamic world without firing a single shot or dropping a single bomb. That's walking softly and carrying a big stick.
Thank you very much, Phil. Dr. Jasser, I'm going to ask you a very personal question here. You are a reformer. You have stood against jihad. You've stood against Sharia in America. And we know that the majority of the Muslims in this country want neither. But what is the impact on you personally when you stand boldly as you have stood? What is the personal impact on you?
Well, there's no doubt that we do, especially my family, pays a price for the stance that we've taken. And because for the most part, we don't do this from afar. We attend mosque regularly, and the sermon 2 holidays ago was about that doctor in town who's on Fox and is supposedly a bigot against Muslims, that we have traitors within the community. But my response to that, when my son leaned over and said, "Boy, he's talking about you, Dad," my response was then to transcribe the sermon that I was taping, confront them publicly as to how, if this was said in Saudi Arabia, that would have been a death threat, versus actually having Muslims pay a price. And when people wonder where are the voices of moderate Islam, those of us that speak out from within, from tough love, are labeled as traitors, are labeled as Islamophobes rather than actually people who love our faith that are trying to stop the suffocation of free speech. But having said that, the bottom line is that anyone who knows me well knows that I'm devout, I'm pretty orthodox in my personal practice, and I love my faith. We've helped a number of mosques start, but there's no doubt that we do have a security profile as a result. We get threats from all sides of the spectrum. But I have to tell you, having family that I just talked to last night, dodging barrel bombs from the Russians and Assadists and Khomeinists in Iran, in Aleppo, the largest town in Syria, dodging those bombs, it's the least I can do living in the comfort of the greatest democracy on the planet to try to defeat this war from the comfort of the home that the American taxpayers gives me and the ability to do this. So thank you and God bless you.
All right, give our panel a round of applause. Thank you very much. God bless you all and thank you. Let me remind you that they will be signing their books. All three of them have a book and they'll be signing those books.